All right, so the Clipper around the world race is it's a little bit like the Volvo race. Anyone can apply to join this race, though. And once you get accepted, there is about 4 weeks of training that they put you through. This shows the race route. Starts in England, carries down to South America, over to South Africa, then to Australia and around, up to Asia, and then the Pacific. And then around the US, it's through the Panama Canal, keeps it a little safer that way, and then back across the Atlantic again. So last fall, I raced the southern leg, so the blue section here, from Cape Town to Fremantle. Flew home for Christmas. I had 3 weeks at home. And then first week of January, I gave the Shellbacks talk then, packed myself up for racing in both the tropics and the cold of the Pacific. Packed my son up, who was going to France for 2 months, which is how I was able to do this racing. And then I flew back to Australia and joined in again with the race. These are the Clipper boats. This is a fleet of them. There's 11 in the fleet. They're fiberglass boats. They're designed for the ocean. They have, crash zones. So if you hit anything, they're double ruddered boats. They're very, very well designed for how they're used. This is their 4th time around the world. So there's this time, and I think there's one more time they're planning on racing them around the world, and then they're going to replace the fleet. This is what the boat looks like. So it looks very similar to a Volvo boat. Here's the deck shot. Gives you an idea. You can see the 2 wheels. They're behind cages. They're behind cages because in the Southern Ocean and the rougher weather, the waves coming over the deck will literally knock you over. And in fact, the Southern Ocean, the last leg when I did it, on another boat, a wave came and it literally took out one of the helming wheels and the cage, both cages that got washed overboard. That was how strong the force was. So you can see there's 2 coffee grinder winches, several deck winches, and everything gets used. And in fact, you often run out of winches because there's so much to manage. Life below deck. So this looks relatively nice for crew quarters on an ocean racing boat. It's not bad, the space. Here's the galley area. Again, the galley actually is very well designed. You have the counter on each side of the stove. So when you're cooking and prepping food, you don't have to be tied into the stove. You've got the 2 counters there that support you very well, which is great. We have things set up to make it really easy to use. So all our water bottles are stored right beside the stairs on the way up, so it's quick to grab. The heads, there's 2 heads, both on starboard, which is a bit unfortunate. Depending on your tack, it can be hard to get the water to flush out. You'll see here, it's the basic setup. There's no mirror. I don't know if any offshore boats have mirrors really, because really you don't want to see what you look like when you've been sailing for 3 weeks and you haven't showered and you're tired and your hair is all tousled. And you'll also see there is no toilet seat. And there's no toilet seat because when the boat is dropping off waves, people have unfortunately got themselves caught. So they've removed the toilet seats on these boats now. This is a forepeak. Again, you can see the quantity of sails. We have, this boat has the mainsail, obviously, Yankee sails, stay sails. You've got 1s, 2s, and 3s of each, spinnaker, code zeros, wind seeker, and storm sails. So there's a lot to keep organized in the front. We really do our best to have everything very clearly set out because you're tired, you're working, each leg can be different crew coming on. You're working at night, you're working under red light, so everything is organized as much as it can be. The nav station. The nav station here is at the back of the boat. It is right between the AQP or the mate's bunk and the skipper's bunk. Lots of equipment there. Logbook, which is updated every single hour. There's lots of communication that Clipper has with like the skipper. When you leave for the race, one of the requirements is you hand in the SIM card of your phone. You're not allowed to take the SIM card with you. You're not allowed to communicate with home individually. So what you can do is you can pay to use the boat email, and you have to choose your quantity of time ahead of time, and you pay, and you sort of have to guesstimate how much you're going to need with your emails. And that's how you communicate with home. The emails go out, I think it's every 6 hours. So if you send an email home, it could be 12 hours, 24 hours before you get a reply by the time it goes through the Clipper system to your home and then back. But it is a way you can stay in touch with people. So the Clipper race, you can choose to do individual legs of the entire race. So before each new leg, they go out for a refresher sail. And this is so that the Around the Worlders can, share with the people joining in. We are all one team, but if you haven't raced together recently, you need to just fine tune your skills again. So there's always a day where we have a refresher sail. So this is us heading out. I think this is actually South Africa, but the sail you can see on deck here, this is a Yankee sail. It gives you an idea of how big the sails are in this boat. I mean, it's so different than what we're used to with most boats we sail. This is a tack at super light air, but I just wanted to share with you the idea of what goes on when you are tacking and how many people are involved with the different sails.
Lee-ho. Okay, helm to lee.
The other thing we do is man overboard practice before every leg. You do. We have a man overboard dummy, which is affectionately called Bob. It is the weight of a man. It's 70 or 90 kilograms in weight. They practice a tethered man overboard and an untethered man overboard. So generally on these boats you are tethered on. So hopefully if you slip over, you're just going to be over the lifeline and not away from the boat. If you do go in the water, when we practice, we throw the man overboard. Here where it's warm weather, so it's pretty quick to put a climbing harness on. And if it's cold water, someone is down below or is in a dry suit before they get their climbing harness on. They're hooked on to a halyard, take down another halyard, take down a strop that you would then put around the swimmer, the victim in the water. And the two people are winched up together. And generally, it's not going to be a calm, beautiful day like this. The boat is going to be crashing through the waves. It's going to be cold water. And so you assume when you bring up the man overboard that you don't have one victim or injured person, you've got two. All right, before each race, they have a chat with the crew about it. We were starting off of the Whitsundays, which is the northeast corner of Australia. And with the Great Barrier Reef here, they didn't want to have racing going through the reef. They didn't want to risk anything to the reef or to the boats, of course. So we actually had to motor for the first 24 hours to get out to where the race start was. As a result, there was no race committee boat. It was a Le Mans race start. The other factor here is we were sailing through the doldrums, right up north through the equator. They didn't want us to be wallowing about for days and days and days on end. So they put in this sort of strategic option that between 12 degrees south and 4 degrees south, you can motor. You can motor for 4 degrees of that distance and for a maximum of 36 hours. And so it becomes a strategy of you choosing when you're going to put your engine on, because chances are there's not going to be enough wind for the whole time, and you have to choose your best time to go ahead and with that motoring. We had pirate training because we were racing off Asia, and there are areas that it's a little bit more dangerous there. I must say my husband was a little alarmed when he saw these slides. This is the tips and tricks they give you. Read the SSOPs. I'm not sure I want to be doing that if I see a pirate coming. I think I need to be beyond that. And then this one I actually found quite funny, because essentially what they said was make yourself look as big and tough as possible. The communication, speaking about, you know, possibly putting out a Mayday, turning off your AS, turning off your VHF. So you're limiting communication with them. But they told us, they said, if you can, you have the entire crew come up on deck dressed in your fowlies, and you look as big and strong as you can. And they said this, and I thought it reminded me of what you do if you see a bear or a coyote, and you try and make yourself looking really big and strong. So I showed you below deck before. There was nothing there. When you start and you have everyone coming on board and you're trying to put your gear away, suddenly it doesn't seem so roomy. So there's 4 bunks you can see in this picture. There's 2 in front of it. Essentially, you have 10 crew in this area, and you are trying to find space to tuck your gear. So you get 1 cubby, maybe 1.5 cubbies. So this is my gear tucked away. I have the duffel bag there because I was going to be doing the Pacific, so I have all my cold weather gear. And in the top 2 bags is just, you know, your day-to-day clothing, and you pack very light. I would have 3 t-shirts, 3 long sleeve shirts, 2 pairs of sailing shorts, and sports bra and shorts to sleep in. That was it. That was all. That's what you have for a month for clothes for wearing. Here's the fleet, the morning of our race, looking ready to go. And unfortunately, we got delayed. A couple of the boats had trouble with their water makers, and they were waiting for equipment to come in. So they actually postponed the race start by 2 days. So we'd come down to the docks, all set to go. You'd said your goodbyes to family and friends on the phone, and then we find out from our skippers that it's delayed 2 days. So everyone's like quickly checking back into hotel rooms with another day or 2 to relax before we headed out sailing. This is the pre-race photo. There's always one at the start and the end. Everyone in their team kit. Our boat was Zhuhai. This is the skipper. So we switched skippers, which was great news for us. People who heard my Southern talk know stories from before. And we were so lucky. I felt so fortunate. This is Wendy Tuck. She has raced around the world twice with Clipper. She was a skipper. She won it last time. She's the first woman to win an around the world race. I felt so lucky, because as a sailor, as a helmsman, as the skipper, to be able to sail with a female skipper that is so talented and have the opportunity to learn from her, I felt very, very fortunate. So this is us slipping lines. You can see it's tricky lighting here. They have a media camera down here. So as you are pulling away, the media camera is going, they're filming you. They are very, they like to make a big show. They like to make the most of every moment. And so when the boats leave docks, it's essentially in a parade. Every 3 minutes, one boat slips their lines, the team song is played, and the boats head out. The first thing you do out in the water is it's called a media parade, and you can see all the boats with their mainsails up, which has all the promotional and sponsor information. There'll be a media barge or media boats, and also boats with friends or family to watch. So you do one final sort of pass around with people seeing you out on the water before you head off for the next month. So we had 24 hours of motoring before we got out through the Great Barrier Reef, and we got busy with tasks. There's always things you can be working on the boat. This is Wendy here working with the crew. She had joined us just 3 days before the race. So she had a lot to take in to get to know us as a crew, and she was hands-on working with us, trying to get to know us as much as possible before the actual racing began. We got out to the start of the race. This is the wind we had, which was none. So we were postponed again. And so we went swimming. And well, most people did. I took photos, but so we were in the water maybe 10 minutes. Our skipper was on lifeguarding duty, watching out for sharks and jellyfish, and everyone had a quick splash around the water. This is Magnus, one of my watchmates, a hilarious guy. He is such a character, as you can tell. This is the scramble net. So this is how you get back on board if you go overboard. This is how the swimmers got back on board when they had their little paddle boat in the ocean. But the reason the boats have it is the freeboard on these boats is so high. I'm going to say it's probably 5 foot, maybe more. There's no chance if you're in the water, you can reach up or someone can reach down to you and grab you. And so one of the safety measures they've put in place is if someone goes overboard, beyond throwing out the Dan buoy and putting out your mayday call and someone dressing in the rescue gear, one of the other things you do is you drop this net over the side of the boat. So if by chance the person is, has grabbed onto a line or something and can get by the boat, there is a hope that they can, or you can go down and help pull them up. This is the start of the race. So it's a Le Mans race start, which means one boat is selected. They are the center, the controlling boat. It's just done by picking numbers. And then each of the boats afterwards, you get your spot again. You draw straws and you get your spot that you get. And the center boat gets to choose what the sail configuration will be. And they control the start. Everyone has to line up, mainsails up, engines on, bows in line. And then they do the countdown, 10 minutes. And then when you hit 4, I think it's 4, I'm trying to remember, 4 minutes, all of the crew has to be at the stern of the boat. Which here was quite easy because it was light air, so we didn't have to be tethered. If it's windy weather and you're all tethered, you have to think really carefully how you're going to manage this, because you have 4 people running forward to sweat the stay sail and the Yankee sail. So you got to organize how they're standing in line with their tethers so they can all run forward and get to their spots. Everyone else that's in the cockpit, once again, you're trying to figure out who's going to the Yankee versus the stay sail, halyards and winches, and organize yourself so you get there as quick as possible, because the sooner you get your sails up, the sooner you're going to pull away. Here's a little video clip just showing the beginning of this race. It's just a short part of it.
Start in 3, 2, 1. Go, go, go!
So you can see they're sweating the sails, getting them up. We didn't have a lot of wind for this race start. You can see that too. Okay, try and jump ahead. Great. So this is the race start. Wendy on the helm. You have to stick with a sail configuration for the first 10 minutes, and then after that, you're allowed to do whatever you want to do. You get to race and sail as you want to sail. So this was the beginning of our race. So it's, the race is on. You think about the adrenaline you normally have for a club race. Think about it now when you're starting a race and this is it. You are going for the next month, day and night, and spinnakers up, down, all conditions, and you are racing. Put this in, just the boat with the 2 wheels. Each wheel has different instruments in front of it. And depending on what sail configuration you have up, you choose to be on different sides of the boat so you can see it better or use the instruments more easily. You can do this as long as the air is light. In heavy air, the only side you can be on is the windward side. It's too dangerous to be on the leeward side. So once the spinnaker's up, it is, the full team effort, because you have to have someone on the coffee grinder constantly. The sails are huge. Even in light air, someone has to be on the coffee grinder working. And here you can see someone on the sheet in the coffee grinder. When the wind picks up, Suddenly you have, you've got your helmsman. Often you have a backup helmsman who can also then manage the main if something happens. You have the individual playing the spinnaker sheet, one, sometimes two people on the coffee grinder to grind in the spinnaker sheet, and someone on the bang to release it if the weather, if it's really blustery or worried about a broach. So if you have a shift with, you know, 6 of you on your watch, pretty much the entire time, all of you are on deck working for your 4 hours or 6 hours while you are on deck. So it's a pretty busy time. So beyond just all the actual sailing, every time your sail comes down, you have to flake it, fold it, put it away. And the stay sails and Yankee sails we do on deck. The spinnaker gets wooled and put away down below deck. These sails are huge. The mast on this boat is 90 foot. So you have to think you've got roughly a 90-foot length of spinnaker on a 70-foot boat. So you end up stretching it from the very bow of the boat all the way to the stern. You go down one of the crew hallways with the tack, and then the foot goes back up that hallway through the galley, down the other crew hallway, and the clue is there. And then you have to, you know, gather the sail and wool it all. It's a huge job. And every single time there's a spinnaker change, that's what you're doing. And you can see there's no other space to do anything when this is going on. This is they are just finishing with a spinnaker. You can see they're not wearing a lot of clothing. This was a theme. It was brutally hot, brutally hot. So by the time you'd finished a job like that, you were, I mean, absolutely parched. But that's the conditions that we had. Meal making. This is early on because you can see it's fresh vegetables still. Well, sort of fresh. They're looking a bit dodgy. Most of it was canned food. We would have the fresh for the beginning, and then it was canned food and pastas and rice. We had a menu set out. Obviously, the food had to be planned for the entire time. So you can see we started 18th of January, and they were planning for 15th of February, 29 days of food planned. Every 7 days we repeated. So I have to say on the Southern Ocean, you know, after you'd had a couple meals, you know, you're on the repeat for the third time. There were some meals that I couldn't stomach anymore. And it would be like a bowl of cereal for me. We had some unfortunate canned chicken that was more bony than chickeny. So you have a time or two of that and it's like, oh, I think I'll just have a granola bar or a bowl of cereal and I'm good to go. Guys eating food on deck. If you notice the size of the bowls, they're like the size of a salad bowl you'd have for 4 or 6 people. And the reason they do that is if the boat's heeling, obviously, it's not going to tip out so much. And also when you're on deck, it's less likely to blow away. But it's really hard when you're prepping food and you're cooking for 20 people, which most of us don't do on a regular basis. And then you go to dish out the food and you're trying to portion it out. It's really tricky to understand the portions when you're using bowls that are this big. So what else happens below deck? Obviously, we have the meals. We have sail repairs. Every boat carries a full sewing machine. So you're either doing sail repairs by hand or with the sewing machine. The daily cleaning. Heads are cleaned twice a day. The bilges get cleaned every day. Every surface gets wiped down with sanitizer. Every grab rail gets wiped down. The pull tabs on the head there get cleaned. It's a big part of life on the boat. Bread making. So one of the treats on the boat is having fresh bread first thing in the morning. So in the middle of the night, under red light, someone is making bread. And the galley stove oven is only so large, and we can fit in 2 bread loaf pans. So you get 2 loaves of bread for your 20 crew. So in the morning, you know, you each get your 1 slice of fresh bread, which is a huge treat. And then what else happens? You're trying to find little spaces below deck. I mean, this is Ken or Chris, one of my watchmates, and he was doing some of the media work. And you just find a little corner to be in, because if you're hot bunking, you can't do it in your bunk. And if there's stuff going on in the saloon, that's busy. So you just find a corner to get your work done. This is Simon. He's my upper bunk mate, and just stepping up to his bunk. And it looks pretty easy. It's not bad. You know, it's a bit of a hike up. Imagine it, of course, when the boat is heeled far over and you are dropping off waves and you are trying to balance getting up there. And if you see above his head, there are no handholds. So you are climbing up on an angle with the waves. You end up grabbing onto the cubbies that are behind the bunk, but there's nothing above your head to hold on to. It's actually quite tricky. I spoke about close quarters. It is close quarters. You get to know people very, very well. This was the attire that most people wore below deck. This is what we slept in. The men were just in underwear. The women were in a sports bra and shorts. It was so hot. There's me on my bunk. I'm hot bunking. So I have my sarong down. That means as I am lying there in my pool of sweat, it goes into my sarong, and when I'm done and my bunkmate comes, I take my sarong away and she puts hers down. And that's sort of as much as you can do to make it your own little space. The temperature on the boat. So Wendy, our skipper, is from Australia and sailed around the world. And she said she has never, ever encountered such hot conditions sailing. And I have to say, I was at the log one morning, I think it was 6 or 7 in the morning, and the thermometer down below deck at that time was 37 Celsius. And that would be like as cool as it got, because it's at the end, you know, we just had night and had enough time for the boat to cool down. In the day, I'm sure it was, you know, well into the mid 40s. So if you were off shift in the day and you went below to rest, you would often go down and lay there, and you would just, you just couldn't. It was unbearably hot. At times, you know, I would try and I would wake up, and you know, when you have, you're not feeling well and you have a fever, you go to bed and you wake up in a pool of sweat. That's what it was sleeping below deck, even in the evening, but during the day, it was literally impossible. This is the end of my bunk. So I'm hot bunking, and when I leave, someone else is in that space. So you have it set up. You can grab the stuff you need and then get out of the way. So I've got my hat, my sunglasses, gloves, good to go. I have this little ditty bag here that had my electrolytes, Advil, gravel in case it was needed, zinc. And then at the end, this little pouch here, this is your life jacket. And the life jacket is always kept by your bunk. So if there's ever an emergency, you don't have, 10 people running to the wet locker to try and get their life jackets. They can grab it from their bunk, put it on, get on deck, and be active. Of course, people would find other places to sleep because sometimes it was just, too much wherever you were. The shadow of the mast became a popular spot. Often there were even people lined up. You'd see 3 people in a row sitting in a line trying to stay in that little titty bit of shade. The other basics of life, brushing teeth. It has to be done, of course, in the heads, you can't do it in the galley. You can see here, I would say, by the bags under my eyes, and they're like frantic curls. This is well into the voyage because I'm looking pretty rough. But I have to say, sometimes you come down and you're so tired and there's a lineup for the heads and you just think, not brushing my teeth this time. Go to your bunk. And I learned, actually, I started carrying mouthwash, and I would take a tiny little drop of mouthwash, brush my teeth at my bunk. You don't even spit it out and just go to sleep because you only have so much time off watch and you have to optimize it. No showers. So when it rains, people make the most of it and get that brief cool down and a little bit of cleaning. Okay, I'm putting this video in. This is from the Southern Ocean. I wanted to try and share with you what it's like below deck. When you have 20, 24 people on a boat working together, this particular video, we happen to have 3 watches. So you have a watch coming down, you have someone there, you have someone on deck, but I wanted you to see how busy it was. So this is Ryan going to brush his teeth with his cup of water. These guys are undressing from being on deck. People having their bread. And this is my watch. We were on standby. I'm going to put it on one more time and show you. Oop, go back. Sorry about that. So I just want to point out a couple things. You can see with the rope here, it's an indication the boat's actually heeling really far over, and we're probably going through some pretty big waves. The galley area is quite wide, and it's very, very easy to fall. So in rough weather of any sort, we had to have a rope up so you could safely get from one side to the other. The other thing you can see, you can tell the angle of heel we're on if you look at the stove and how gimbaled it is. So this is life below deck. You better be pretty good at getting along with people because that's how much space you have at times. All right, so in the race, we got to the doldrums race line start. So we were the blue boat, that's our boat. We were in first, which was brilliant. And this is when we had to decide, we have 8 degrees to cover and there's 4 degrees to put an engine on. And so the strategy is, when do you put the engine on? So we were coming up and there was no wind, coming into no wind. The boats behind us had wind, so we could sit in our little patch of no wind and wait for them all to catch up. And instead, we put the engine on right away and hoped that 36 hours later, some wind would fill in where we were and we would stay ahead of the pack. That was our plan. So now we're motoring, and we're motoring for 36 hours. Motor sailing, but motoring. This is James, our mate. The IKEA leaf, I brought it to keep some shade. I think it must be a North American IKEA invention, because no one had heard of it. They all thought I was a bit loopy when I said, oh, I've got this great umbrella like a leaf, just wait. And then we put it up, and I have to say, it was used constantly. Constantly. We were ducking behind it to get a tiny little bit of shade for a reprieve. 36 hours of motoring, what do? You catch up on sleep. Daytime, nighttime, on deck, you don't have to worry, there's not much to do. So we finish our 36 hours and there's no wind. There's still no wind. So we're sitting here and the boats behind us, some of them caught some squalls and stuff, and they then started their motoring later than when we did. So we are sitting in this wind hole and almost the entire fleet motored by us. So if you think of racing and you're in a wind hole and another boat catches a puff of wind and they sort of go by you, how frustrating it is. I have to say it is far more frustrating to be sitting in a sailboat race in a wind hole and watch other sailboats motor by you, and they're allowed to do it. And there was nothing we could do. So we, very slowly waited and drifted and did our best. We got to the end of the doldrums corridor. There was a race line, finish line you had to cross. Everything, of course, is virtual. You're in the middle of the ocean. So you have to be really careful with virtual marks. It sounds intuitive, but on several occasions, boats actually missed marks slightly when they went to go around them. There's nothing on the water and you're going off your instruments. So that was a sort of a new thing for me as an around the cans racer, when you're there and you're racing and you go around a mark and there's nothing on the water that you're seeing. This chart shows the state of wind that we had, which was none. This whole area this wind hole, it's another wind hole over Indonesia, Papua New Guinea. This wind hole here, it was bigger than land masses. Our skipper had never, ever, ever seen a wind hole so large in her life. So we have, I don't know, 3,500 miles to go, 5,000 miles to go, whatever we were at, and we are not moving. Some of the time, actually, what we did is we used the currents. We weren't moving as far as wind speed, but there was a current that was pushing us a little bit in the right direction. So what do you do when you have no wind? Well, Magnus is an artist, so he started painting and drawing, keeping record with the boat, enjoying moments with, when you'd have a bird come visit. Magnus got even more creative. Remember, we had 5 days of a wind hole, day and night, day and night. So we had porridge in the morning as part of breakfast. And Magnus started to, I think his creative genes were really jumping out. He took the porridge and he started creating busts of the different crew members. So we had that going on. I mean, you have to laugh. What else can you do when you're absolutely not moving? Then he got more creative and he started making caricatures of all the fenders. So, you have little moments of fun with it all. So the heat, I just can't even begin to emphasize the heat at this time. I went up on deck one day and my watchmates, they were like all flaked out. And I said, it looks like a murder scene when they do the chalk drawings. So then, of course, they took that to heart and they were like looking even more desperate on the deck. And what do? You watch the sunsets. You sit quietly on the lee side of the boat trying to, a little bit in shade if it's daytime, but trying to put a little bit of heel on the boat and hope somehow you can go forward. It's very, very, very tough. Okay, this video clip. This is me. I'm at the helm. I'm trying to keep my true wind at about 140 in almost no knots. I'm not being very successful because there's no wind. It's spinning around the boat and yet desperately you're trying to keep it at the 140, 150 so you can keep the code flying. And it's very, very challenging. This is my helming mate, Dave the Rave. Dave was brilliant. And our shifts were, because it was so hot, we were doing 6 hours at night. 6 hours and 6 hours at night, and then 3 4-hour shifts in the day. So every other day, your night shift was changing by 6 hours. 6 hours of helming at night when you're watching instruments like that and you're really focused and really trying is truly exhausting. And so at some point, 4 or 5 in the morning, he would, grab a quick little nap, curl up on the floor in front of the wheel under the traveler and grab a 20-minute nap before he was back on the wheel. So generally, if the weather was good, anyone would helm. If it was stormy, if it was tricky winds at night, flying the spinnaker in high winds or super light air, it was just Dave and I on the wheel on our watch. And so I picked up his this little trick, and he laughed at me one day because, again, I curled up for a little nap, 20-minute nap to take a break, and I guess I gathered maybe the spinnaker sheets or some of the lines, and I laid on the deck, and then I lay down, had my nap, got up, and he turned to me and he said, you'd make a really good homeless person. I said, what? He said, just kick a few leaves together, you'll tuck in, you'll be fine. I'm like, Dave, I'm aspiring to be more than that, but it's good to know that I can manage if I hit that point. So I put this clip, this picture in. The skipper and I on this day worked so hard, switching between trimming the sails and the wheel. I had a lot more trimming skills than most people, and so in the light air, it was a lot more on my shoulders than others. And on these boats, like Volvos, you can build up apparent wind. If you work really carefully, you can build your apparent wind up. You can go from 2 knots to 4 knots to 5 knots. but you have to be so careful, and the patience is so intense. So she and I kept switching spots between trimming and helming to do so. And I have to say, at the, I remember at the end of the day, I had like a wicked heat exhaustion, but we did sort of make a little bit of ground that day, so it was worthwhile. And I appreciated my IKEA leaf and glad that I brought it. This video clip shows the heat. This is just a little idea from another boat. Another boat had the media recorder, not ours. Poor guy burnt back. Bucket shower, trying to cool off. This is the motoring section of the doldrums. So I just wanted to share that to give you an idea what it was like for every boat, every person. It's hard to jump past. So the Southern Ocean, when I did my my picture of my watch, we were fully geared up. Like the picture I showed you before in the Fallies, fully geared up. Sailing in Southeast Asia here, it was minimal clothing. I generally wore always, yeah, you can see it still a bit. I always wore a sun shirt. I always wore long sleeves. But really, people were down to the least amount of clothing they could wear because it was just that hot. Equator. So we made it to the equator, and we crossed the line 11 o'clock at night, 11:30 at night. There we go from south to north. So it's pretty special when you see that. And actually, I've got to say, it was quite magical because, sorry, it's going again. Because it was dark almost. It's an imaginary line. So to cross it at night, it actually sort of seemed to make sense to me. This was our King Neptune. It's our mate. This was King Neptune. So we had our little rituals going from polywogs to shellbacks. And it's quite funny. I was on galley duty that day, and the skipper came down and she starts asking for all these obscure things. And I was like, oh, I'm not sure. And then I was like, hang on a second. She's making up the concoction to pour over our heads. And it was oatmeal and food coloring. And I thought, at first I thought, I'll just pretend we don't have this. I thought, well, if I don't do that, she's going to go and find like the anchovies and we're going to get that. So I stuck with her plan. Magnus, the character Magnus, I just got to grab my phone so I can read this. He wrote a poem about crossing the equator, and he brought all these rubber gloves and he wrote sayings on them that were all mixed up and backwards. I'm going to read you part of the poem that he wrote. It was delightful. Water goes down the plug hole in an anti-clockwise direction, north of the meridian, at least that's my perception. The world spins on its axis, straight lines warp to curves. Front is back, it's back to front. The watery mirror just observes. Orion's upside down he is. The moon is widdershins. The tide comes in when it should go out and out when it should come in. Will the sun appear at midnight and the moon shine through the day? Do the neap tides change to spring tides and winter come in May? And if the world's gone lunatic and normal is in reverse, when we sail across the equator line and better turns to worse. So it was, I just thought it was a brilliant poem. It went on, but I thought that was brilliant that he put the effort in to give us that little bit of fun that day. And I have to say that little line there about better turns to worse was sort of true for what happened in the world. I made a cake. I stayed up late through the night. I made a cake, the flattest cake I've ever made. I had my egg ratio wrong. We didn't have any fresh eggs left. We learned in the Southern Ocean, they only keep 2 weeks and we were past that. So I was using powdered eggs. And, but I had my, Magnus to give a hand, and he became a cake artist. So he has got his map of the world, and he's got his icing, and he's got his knife as a little palette pen. And we made this cake for the crew. And we even have our little Zhuhai boat, a little 3D model of it crossing the equator. So we had that to enjoy. So the wind finally we did get wind. It wasn't only no wind, it was just that was the majority of it compared to the Southern Ocean. We actually had a chance to wear foul weather gear. Pretty exciting when you haven't done it for a long time. I mean, it's my light foul weather gear, but that's still something. We had really some wonderful winds and beautiful, beautiful moments. Boat, hard over on its side again, which was such a treat when you've gone so many weeks of having a flat boat to have a boat sailing like this. And to me, this is what clipper sailing is. This is what these boats are designed for. Below deck, here I am scrambling, trying to manage my way down the hallway, carrying some of my gear under the red light, and it gives you an idea of the angle that you're on. So this is coming towards I think it's towards the end of this leg. And with the wind, I have to say, there are times, even though this is a 70-foot boat, there are times when the wind is right, especially with the spinnaker up, you can push it and you can feel that edge on it. And it reminds me of when I'm sailing a dinghy and you're right on the edge and you're pushing it and it feels brilliant. So we are, roaring our way towards a finish line, but it's a finish line that we don't know where it is because COVID is happening in the world. It's early February now. Every few days we'd get a little update about COVID. And I mean, probably for here in Canada as well, when it first came out in January, you sort of thought, well, that's far away. It's not affecting us. We thought the exact same thing. And really, we were very safe on the boat. We're all healthy. We are on our own world. We had everything we need. COVID had nothing to do with us, except our finish line was and our port was to go into Sanya, China. Well, China shut down. And so Clipper was trying to figure out where we were going to go to. And at first, one port was shut down. There were 3 ports we were to visit in China. And then the next one, and then the next one. And so maybe the last week of racing, we didn't know where we were going to. We just knew we kept racing north, but we didn't quite know when this was all going to end. With all the ports shutting down, when we were heading up the east side of the Philippines, one of the moments when we realized, all right, maybe this is bigger than what we're understanding. On the VHF radio, we spoke with a fishing boat we passed, and it was a Chinese fishing boat. And they were no longer, China had shut their ports. So they were out at sea. We said, well, go to another country. And they said they can't. They said all the ports in Asia have shut down to any Chinese vessel. So they had been out there for 2 weeks already. They had no place to go to. And it was shocking to hear, from us on our boat, on our race, the adventure of our life, and hear these fishermen that are just literally stuck at sea. So 2 days before we get to the finish, we find out we're going to go into Subic Bay, the Philippines, which was one of our eventual ports with this race. A day before we arrived, we all had to have our temperature taken. The skipper had to take our temperatures. We arrived in port. The Philippine authorities are there. They took our temperature before we stepped off the boat. The entire time we were at the yacht club there, every time we would go back into the club, we would have to have our temperature taken. So they were much more ahead of it, I guess, than what we were expecting, much more on the ball with it, much more cognizant of what was coming, even though at the time the Philippines didn't have any COVID. So Clipper was busy trying to figure out what was going on with the race and where we were going to. And we got busy with what we had to do, which is you clean the entire boat. You work on every aspect of it. Every single thing comes off the boat when you go into port. Everything gets checked. You can see over here, it's all the life jackets. They all get inflated. They get left inflated for 24 hours. They want to know that there's no small leaks in any of them. All the foul weather gear comes out and gets washed. All the sails come out. Literally every floorboard is lifted. The bilges are scrubbed. A safety check is done of the entire boat, of the rigging. Every single nut and bolt on the stanchions is checked. Your through hull fittings are checked. It is this extensive 4-page list because you need to know when you go back out, your boat is good to go. You don't want to find out you were just careless and you missed something that you could have been fixed when you were on shore. Sails come off. We had to get some new, I think marketing, this is on our main sail. This gives you an idea of how big the sail is with how many people are required to carry it. The spinnakers, they're the ones generally that need repairs. Every boat has their own sewing machine. You can see them here on shore. There's one here, and there's one here, and there's one over there. The problem is you have all these boats that are trying to find a space to fix their spinnakers that are the size of tennis courts. And how do you do that? I mean, that's just crazy. But people do it and they find a way. I think I put my pointer on. Anyway, never mind. The winches are cleaned. And I went on to food duty. So I took over victualling. So that meant I first off had to do an inventory of all the food that we had on the boat. I did it with another woman, TC. So our original skipper of the race was very keen on canned food, and Wendy was not so keen on canned food. You know, it's better to have dried food. It's less weight, it's less garbage. So we first inventoried everything. And then the goal was to use up the food as much as we could. So before the Pacific, we would could have a menu that made more sense for offshore racing. So this was, here's our, it's a short race now. This was going to be a 10-day race up to Japan and back. So that was the food plan. And you have a recipe for every meal. It's not that people don't know how to make, especially pasta, it's simple, but it's to keep track of the amount of ingredients you need. Because when you're providing for the boat, you plan on so many of each thing for each meal. And if someone went and took, 8 peppers, later on, they would be short, you'd be short food. And as well, we had, I think I mentioned about that, the chicken curry, the chicken bone curry, as I called it. There was that one, and dog food stew, another one from the Southern Ocean, that were really tricky meals to try and eat. A lot of people became vegetarian after that. So I'm doing the food planning. This is our fridge. This is a cooler. This is all we have. Essentially, it's the size of a standard cooler. This is what we have for refrigeration for 20 people for a month at a time. So you have to plan your meals around that, and without very much meat, and plan the amount of cheese and dairy you need very, very carefully. So you start organizing the meals, and I've got my little tags, meal by meal, and then they go into stuff sacks. This had our spare food in it, but every day has one, every stuff sack has 1 day's worth of food. And then you go and get your fresh ingredients and add it to it. The day before you leave port, you get your fresh veggies and have them stored. And of course, toilet paper, all those essentials, cleaning supplies, toilet paper, paper towel. And the toilet paper, paper towel, every single one you put in an individual bag, just in case there's, water gets through. You don't want to lose all of your supplies. So really, I don't know how to get rid of this little bit, but anyway. Our final race was a 6-day race, and the plan was to have a short race because people were joining in now to go and sail the Pacific Ocean. And so they wanted to have this short race and to give people a chance to be comfortable on the boats. And the race started, another Le Mans race start, and it ended up being nighttime, which if you think it's hard in the daytime to line the boats up and all be equal, it is even trickier at night. I've got a video clip. Let's see if it'll come up. Oh, hang on. So this is what you're seeing at night, us as boats trying to get ourselves into some sort of line so we can do this Le Mans race start. And I'm going to try and click on this pointer and see if I can get rid of that yellow line. All right, so I put this clip in, sailing at night. Any of you that have sailed at night? Oh, back we go. My thing is jumping now. And if you know that have sailed at night, you know how hard it is to see things. You know how tricky it is if it's stormy weather, or if you don't have stars. If you don't have stars, it's almost impossible to steer straight. You're staring at the instruments only, which is truly exhausting. If you have funny waves or wind, it can be throwing you around a little bit. Around the Philippines, what was so prominent was fishing boats. And I came up on deck one night and I looked around, and you know, you're tired, you come up, you've had whatever rest you've had, come up on deck, and I look around and I felt like I was in the middle of a clock face, our boat. And all around there were lights, 100 of them, 150 lights all around, and it was fishing vessels. And I sort of went on deck and I was like, oh, okay. Here we go, you know, spinnakers up, going to be taking this boat, navigating through all these fishing boats. You can't really tell at night with lights exactly how boats are moving and what's going on. A lot of the smaller boats don't have their AIS on. They don't have AIS, so you can't use that. Makes it really very, very hard. The fishing boats, what many of them were, is this. So even in the daytime, we had to have spotters to try and keep an eye out for the boats because they were so low to the water. It was really, really hard to spot them. In fact, they reminded me of flying fish because they were just so close to the water, and most of them were blue and they're very friendly people. But of course, the last thing you want to do is snag a fishing line while you're racing. So this last race, what else do we have? We had the skipper's birthday. And, you know, we didn't have much. We made her a cake. We made her a card by hand. That's all we had. But sometimes the simplest gesture can be the kindest. And she smiled all day. And you know what better place to have a birthday than out on the ocean? And you make the most of small moments. So this poor little bird had struggled. We had it several times, but this was the last one. Struggled to get onto the boat. 20 minutes, half an hour, you'd see it come fluttering towards the boat, and it would nearly hit the mast or nearly hit the backstay, and then it would get caught in a backdraft and go away and came back again, and it finally landed. And so we took one of the bowls and a little paper towel, we gave it a drink, and we made it a little sort of nest and tucked it under the hatch so it could rest. And the poor thing was too tired and didn't survive. Woke up in the morning and it hadn't survived. And really, I think it was a little bit of foreshadowing for us for what was to come. The final night of racing, I went below deck, 10 p.m. to do the log, and an email had come in from Clipper that said, the Philippines is closed to foreigners. Said Clipper is now no longer allowed at the yacht club. They don't know where we're going to berth, and they're not sure what's going on. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I thought, you know, if we can't go to the Philippines, Hong Kong shut, China's shut, Singapore's shut, South Korea's shut. I was like, well, maybe Japan still might be open. And of course, because I'd done the food, then I was like, well, I only planned food for like 6 days. This is a short race. And Japan's 5 days away. You always carry a little bit extra, but it's like, you know, how are we going to manage if that's what we have to do? And do we have enough toilet paper? And all this is spinning through your mind. And I went up on deck and chatted with the crew and the mate and said, all right, this is what's going on. And we're racing on, but we don't really know where we're going. And we're not sure what's going to happen. And I have to say, I was like so caught in the moment, you know, where time stands still. And I was supposed to be doing the log. I completely forgot to do the log. So the next person who came down filled it out in the wrong spot and made a bit of a kerfuffle. But anyway, that was my shock at hearing the news of not knowing if we could even go into port anymore. somehow Clipper pulled it together. So this was going to be the end of it all. They got us back into the Philippines. You know, we knew we were back there, and the idea was we would carry on right away as quick as we could to keep racing across the Pacific. If we could get out of Asia, maybe it would be better. So we tied up at the dock. No officials this time to check our temperature. I'm not even sure if we had media photos this time. We didn't have a lot of space because we had the dock and we had our boat. And we had 11 boats there and about maybe 50 meters of dock. We had the gangplank, and at the end of the gangplank was a big gate that was closed. And on the other side of the gate was a military. So we could not go ashore. We were truly quarantined as it used to be on boats of long ago when they were worried about illness or what you were bringing on or vermins, or we could not leave the dock. We had our 50 meters of dock. We had 11 boats. We had 250 sailors. We had 140 berths. So people were sleeping anywhere, on the forepeak, on saloon benches, on sails on deck, because, you know, we were short 100 bunks for the crew. And yet there wasn't like a single argument amongst anyone. We were in very, very close. I don't have any pictures that show how crowded it was. Very crowded conditions. And yet I think sailors, pretty hardy people, and we were used to being in close quarters and limited, limited with things. We just carried on. So what do? We did our laundry. So we by hand and put it out to dry and started working on cleaning the boat up, because the plan was we were going to sail. We arrived Sunday. Clipper told us we were going to leave by Friday for the Pacific. As far as organizing food, they told me to plan on 40 days of food. 40 days of food for 20 people. It's 1,200 meals. I mean, that's a lot to be quickly planning a menu out, calculating quantities that you need. I was not allowed to go ashore to go shopping. I was going to have to give it to a Filipino to go shopping. I couldn't see quantities of cans of food or anything, and I was going to have to do my best guesstimation of how it was all going to be. It's a lot of pressure for sure, and but you do your best, right? We were, all the boats were pretty organized. What do? We put our garbage out on the dock every day, and they would come and open the gate at one point, take all the garbage away, and then shut the gate again. The gangplank was the place to hang out. It was a place where Wi-Fi worked. You can see here, this little line, the water, because we didn't have water on the boats. They would deliver water to us every day. And so we would have to wait for the water to get dropped off to top up our boat supply of water. With so many people there, it's pretty funny. I started taking over this little bit of dock here as my own. And I would be like chatting with my daughter who was in England, trying to figure out if she had to fly home. And there happened to be a tiny little puffer fish with like a wonky fin that would do circles around the end of the dock. And I'd be talking to my daughter, and she'd be telling me this stuff. And I'd be like, oh no, it's fine. You know, we're going to go sailing this. I think this will happen. And I'd be like, oh, there goes the puffer fish again. She's like, Mom, what's going on with you? And I said, Sierra, I only have 50 meters of dock, and I've walked it back and forth for like 3 days now. This is as much entertainment as I have, watching this poor little puffer fish do his circles. This is one of my crewmates, Pat. Lovely, lovely English gentleman. Well, after being in quarantine on the dock for 3 days, they did eventually start letting us go for showers. They would take us, the military would escort us in pairs down to the shower. Again, you have 250 people, so the chance of actually getting a shower is pretty slim. And he and I were, I think we were waiting to go for the shower, and I took a picture. He was at the end of the gangplank, and I took this picture, and I said, Pat, I said, we look like convicts. Like, what has happened to us? Like, this many days in quarantine. I said, this is not good. I said, I don't think your children or grandchildren are going to think so much of you if they see this picture. So what happened? We found out after 3 days, everything was shut down. The race was postponed. We had 48 hours to get out of the country or before the Philippines went into a 30-day lockdown. So the boats had to be packed away because everyone was leaving. They left one person only. Got a flight, came home. I began my 14-day quarantine, sleeping in my daughter's bedroom on her trundle bed, and thinking about the fact that, 5 days earlier, I'd been on the ocean and I had, the endless views, and that's where I wanted to be. I wanted to be enjoying the storms again and enjoying the sunsets and remember what it was sailing the boat, because that's where my heart is. That really was. I mean, quarantine for anyone is hard. Quarantine, I think, when you come straight off the ocean, especially after sailing for pretty much 2 months, it was a real shock. What did I appreciate with Clipper and this offshore racing? I appreciated the camaraderie with my crewmates. People see you at your best and their worst, and they accept you for who you are, right? You have so little creature comforts when you're there. And your emotions become very real and very raw and very genuine. And I think it's very honest that way. And I have to say, a little bit with COVID, I think that's happened with people now. In the summer when we actually got to go out and get a cup of coffee with someone, it was such a treat to be able to do that again. You genuinely appreciated it. Offshore sailing for me has become truly a joy. I love sailing always, but it's a new challenge for me, and it's what I want to keep doing. My next 10 years, that's where my dreams are, is to keep going with the offshore sailing. So I have a final video here of this was the middle race. I actually ended up we did the long race from Australia to the Philippines, and then we did 2 shorter races as we were figuring out what was going on. So this video is of the race up to Japan and back. It's a 10-day race. It gives you some idea of just, life on the boat overall. You see how hard people are pulling the sails. It makes you appreciate again how big everything is. And how heavy the sails are, so heavy. My fellow crew members can come with me. Very easy, that is so careful. So, where are we now? The boats are in the Philippines waiting for us, and the race is supposed to start. Originally, they'd hoped for February. Now they have planned for August. So mid-August in 2021, the race picks up again. They're really hoping they can go and visit all the Chinese ports and then sail on to Seattle was one of the next ports. They're not quite sure. It might be we just go straight on to Panama. It all depends on how things play out. But next year, hopefully at this time, I will have gone back, joined the boat, and sailed across the Pacific. Fingers crossed. Thank you.
Okay, just we'll just in a moment take some questions. Just to make it orderly, because we're virtual, if you could find your Zoom toolbar, it may not look exactly like that. If you then can click on participants, you'll get this down here, and you can click on this button and it will raise your hand and will take you in order. And when I call on you, please unmute yourself so we can have the conversation going. And this way, it's an easy way to make sure everything goes orderly and everybody gets a chance. Diane, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
I don't have a question, but I have a very big thank you, Melodie, and a comment, I guess, and just I'm so impressed with the organization and the cooperation that that is necessary for the team to work together in close quarters and under such circumstances. So I congratulate you and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's really neat to have that experience and work with people and just see how well it all can work. It's lovely.
Yeah, you're brilliant.
Okay, if there are any more questions, please, or comments, please virtually raise your Zoom hand. So I have a question. Are there still somebody looking after the boats and they're stuck in the Philippines?
Yes, one of the skippers, Geronimo. So it was a skipper and a mate originally. The mate stayed until June, so about 5 months. No, 3 months, I guess. And there's one skipper that is still there. And so now, I mean, they have all the typhoons and rough weather coming through. So far, knock on wood, the boats are all okay.
Okay. Okay, John, Tyler, go ahead, unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hey, question simple. Looks like you're going pretty fast. And imagine your biggest worry would be falling overboard. If that ever happens, I think that might be very difficult to recover someone.
In the last race, like 2 years ago in the race, I think they said, Becky might be able to correct me on this. I think they said 16 people went overboard. So they picked up all of them. One didn't survive. They picked them all up. But that is why they're really careful on safety. you tether on all the time. I tether on all the time, unless it's like absolutely flat calm. I tether on. I just don't risk it. And they make you practice man overboard. I've done more man overboard drills in the last 2 years than, you know, even when I used to teach sailing. So I think this year we've only had one person has slipped overboard. But you see the waves come, and even if you're tethered on, or you think you're tethered on or whatever, the waves are huge, and you can still get knocked over but be clipped on.
Okay, next person who, please raise your hand if you have a question, virtually in Zoom. Okay, go ahead, Patty.
Sorry, I forgot to rename myself. How do you end up doing it, volunteering for it?
How do you end up doing, sorry, what was that?
How did you end up being on the crew? How do you end up applying or volunteering, whatever?
Yeah, you have to pay to do it, unfortunately. It's not volunteering, but
Yeah, I don't know.
application process, and so you go online, you apply with Clipper. They care more, they don't care about your sailing experience, not at all. They care about your determination and grit, because life is really hard. How well do you get along with other people? They have a very extensive questionnaire on it, and they ask you all sorts of personal questions, like how do you handle it with someone that you have a problem with? How are you in small quarters? What do you do when you're really too tired? How do you balance your emotions? And then they also ask you to write an essay talking about sort of one of the toughest times in your life, because they want to know you as a person more than you as a sailor. You then go and do your training. It's 4 weeks of training, and definitely if you have sailing experience, it's a big advantage. So I did a lot more sailing on the boat. I helmed a lot. I was flying the spinnaker. I was watch leader, watch captain, because I had so much more experience. But you can learn a lot as you go as well. So people that are newer to sailing can still go and do it and have a brilliant time and learn as they go along.
You know, thank you. It was brilliant. It was brilliant. You got me thinking about it, but I don't think I've got the physical capabilities to be able to
give it a shot. Look it up. Look it up.
Oh, I will. You got me. Anyway, thank you so much. It was brilliant.
You're welcome.
Okay, Spencer, Linda, go ahead and mute yourself.
It was awesome, Melody. And Spence, who figures he's too old, figures our daughter should do it, who's just in her 40s. So
There we go.
we'll talk to her about it.
So yeah, I think the youngest person is 18 and the oldest was 72 maybe. Different legs. Some legs are gentler than others, right?
Oh yeah, that would be.
Depending on your
Are any of your kids involved in sailing at this point?
Yes, and so all three of them, my oldest two have done offshore. I took them down. We did the Caribbean 600 race. They loved it. And my daughter, I worked on a Bobo 60 a couple years ago. And so I was over there and she came into the Fastnet race. She would love to do it. She second.
Oh, that's cool. Really neat. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ron Jenkins, go ahead. Unmute yourself and ask your question.
First off, thanks very much. That was a really interesting presentation, as was your first one.
Thank you.
It makes me think right now of the Vendée Globe. I don't know if you've been tracking them or not.
Yeah, I have a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, which is taking it to the extreme of the extremes. But I was also thinking just of what it takes to be out on the water for that length of time, and thinking of, you know, explorers who in previous centuries spent, you know, a couple of years on a cruise. It was, I guess it's a real test of your own limits.
It is, and it was interesting because when we came up from Australia, because of COVID and things started to become uncertain, and then we hit a little point where we realized we couldn't go to our port in China and we didn't have an answer. And some of the crew were like emailing home every day, trying to get COVID updates or this or that. And the rest of us were like, well, we'll get somewhere, you know. We don't know the destination, we don't know the time frame, but at some point we will arrive. And so it showed the two different types of, I guess, mental, maybe capacity to handle that type of problem.
Yeah, through a curve for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Uh,
I have to say, like, we really felt safer on the water. You know, none of us were ill. We were all, our little world out there was perfect. It's the rest of the
Yeah.
world that was running into trouble.
James, go ahead, mute yourself and ask your question. James? Yeah, you're not still, you haven't unmuted yourself. You're still muted.
There.
There.
You said the young, two questions. One, what was the website about if you want to sign up and go?
Yeah, it's a Clipper Round the World.
Thank you.
I'll see
And-
if they can put a link or something with Shellbacks. Yeah.
Thank you. You said the youngest person was 18, male or female?
Female.
I would just like to make the comment that from neuroscience, the frontal lobes, which in the brain, which do judgment, mature in women in their late teens. In men, it's not till the early to mid 20s.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering how successful they were in surviving that, if there was ever a young male at one of these races. And
I mean, fine. I think I know when we were talking about foredeck, I love doing foredeck. But on the Southern Ocean, I wouldn't do it because I thought that's your most likely place to go overboard. I'm a mom with 3 kids. I know I need to come home. I'm not going to risk it. And it's interesting, the skippers from other years said, oh, there's always some young guys that are keen to go and do that. So maybe that's that frontal lobe, not quite as aware.
yeah, it's an interesting point of view when you look at personal developments. And as a parting venture in the world history, if you haven't read Mary Trump's book about Donald Trump, I suggest you read it because it talks about what bad parenting can do. It's an interesting psychological analysis. Thank you for a marvelous talk and continue racing.
Thank you. I have to say with that, you know, if you have someone that's a little, you know, maybe not making the best decisions, you're on as a watch and you're on as a team, as a boat. If someone does something stupid or gets hurt, the whole boat is affected.
Yes.
So crossing South America to South Africa, 2 people, older guys, fell. Not old, but older, not in their teens, fell. And the boat dropped out of the race. I mean, they had to keep sailing across, but so much energy went into taking care of them when they were trying to get them lifted off to a freighter. And so the rest of the team lost out on racing. So if you have people that are making poor judgment calls, your watch better be kicking in and, you know, reining them in, and your watch leader better be doing that as well. And you have to know people are doing their part. You know, if you're up at the bow doing something with the spinnaker, you need to know your cockpit crew are doing their part, or you're going to get hurt or something's going to break.
That's one of the things that's a spinoff from the Title IX of Women in Team Sports, that team sports promote cooperation, and it's really a wonderful development in, what should I say, with the women's movement for complete equality.
Yep. Yep.
Are there any more questions? Please virtually raise your hand. Seeing none, I'd like to thank Melodie again for her excellent presentation, and Diane will be mailing out a pin to her. Next week, December 2nd, we have Audrey and Judith Millard who are going to rejoin us to continue their Sailing the Dream series, sailing down the west coast of the USA. And the last session in 2020 will be on Wednesday, December 9th with Judith Altry giving us an update on the seafarers and COVID-19, some of which I think may be still out there, haven't got a chance to get home. And with that, we'll have pipes out and then we'll split up into breakup rooms. Thank you very much for attending.
Bravo.
Thanks, Graham. Thank you all.